I like to photograph, okay, cut.
The most important thing that I'm nervous about is the frame rate.
Because I shoot a lot. Like they call me AK machine gun because I shoot a lot of pictures.
Extremely excited, also extremely nervous.
All my life I've done wildlife, nature and ecology related stories. I've never done people in my life.
It's totally out of my comfort zone. But the paper, obviously, we do stories, but they happen few and far between because of the time constraints working on a staff of 2.
This will put me out of my comfort zone and I'll try and learn something different than what I do usually.
This is the first time that I've been around other journalists kind of working on very similar projects and stories and in one place.
To be forced to find the story and I just wander the street and do random pictures, which I have a whole bunch of random pictures that sometimes they can make up like an essay or something, but really to stick to one subject and be forced to develop a story within 3 days for me is a huge challenge.
What's it like being in this town of like 3,000 people?
Oh, I'm from a town of less than 3,000 people, so for me this is a city. You know, you guys got a fucking Walmart here. We don't have anything back at home where I'm from.
It's different. I mean, I haven't seen, outside the people in the workshop, I haven't seen any Asian people. I haven't seen any Asian people.
Who am I looking at? Am I looking at the
Look at him, please. Sorry, I need to roast myself.
Yeah, you do. Come on, be professional about this.
I hate saying stuff like that on video. It just sounds stupid. Saying like, Anyway, did I say too many so far? I hope not.
I was at church this morning and I'm like, oh, this is really different, you know? This is really, really different. This is really middle America. It's definitely a world that I am not accustomed to.
Okay.
I haven't been counting.
Okay. Whoever's editing this will be like, this guy.
Christy Rehagen, 48, is a woman of infinite energy. Through her water aerobics classes for the town's retirees, her decades of service in the Boonville PTA, and her close-knit friendships with Boonville's female movers and shakers, Christy embodies the values that keep small American towns dynamic, thriving communities.
So keep it succinct, to the point. Let your faculty know why we should care.
Okay, so my story is about a woman named Marcia. When she was born, she was told, her mother was told that she would never be able to hear or speak or walk, and now at 53, she's recovering from a double mastectomy and is going strong, living independently.
Don't just say exactly who the person is. Don't just say exactly what the person is doing. Explain why we should care, what makes them special.
Hi, my story is about Timothy Hoosier at Boonville Correctional Center. He's 42 years old and is 2 weeks from finishing a 10.5-year sentence for armed robbery. In prison, he became a newly certified operations engineer / animal trainer and is about to return to his life as a stepfather of 2 in St. Louis, Missouri.
And keep it short. Try to get that down to a sentence or 2.
Jordan Brackman is a junior at Boonville High School and she lost her dad to colon cancer about 4 years ago. Ever since then, she's been helping raise her little brother, taking him to football practice and taking him to school. She's had to grow up a little earlier than expected, and this is a story about coming of age. I'm super excited.
Your guiding sentence, what it is you want to tell us about the person, why they're special. Good luck.
Try it again, like that. Perfect. All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the celebration of the 75-year anniversary of the Missouri Photo Workshop. Thank you for coming out this morning. Yay! You guys experienced a little bit of tradition, by the way. Y'all were out there mingling not just a couple minutes ago. We hit play on the videos, and you all come attracted to the screen of knowledge. That's how we run it each night at the Missouri Photo Workshop. We have a documentary crew. It produces shorts like the one you just watched. Hopefully it pertains to maybe something's happening at that point in time during the week. We hit play, and that's the signal that it's time for the evening critique or all the other good stuff that happens at the evening. So anyway, these are from the archives. We try to keep a good track on things. If we didn't, things like that wonderful exhibit across the hall would not exist. So archives, quite important. So these come from the video vault, if you will. Butterflies was produced by the MU student crew on the first day of MPW 68 in Cuba, and the elevator pitch was midweek at MPW 71 in Boonville. The narrator for the elevator pitch, Jackie Bell. Good morning, Jackie. Hi. She is taking a break today because they just moved College Photographer of the Year over to the Reynolds Journalism Institute because that begins shortly. Exciting. So thank you for being here today. We've had several photographers connect to MPW, to RSVP, and say they hope to be here. Some are here. If you've been a member of the crew, or if you are a photographer who has participated in MPW, please stand real fast, and we'll give you a round of applause. Who's been there? Awesome. This morning and then after this celebration, I hope you get a chance to look through the MPW Retrospective exhibit. There are so many images, 120 or so, pretty close, 121. In fact, we do have one from Sedalia, MPW 75. We slipped that one in right after the workshop. Plus, please take time to enjoy the extended captions because we know that, storytelling requires good captions. It takes a little bit longer to fully appreciate the impact that MPW has had on the photographers, the industry, and the Missourians in the photos, and the captions help explain some of that. The gallery is open all day, and I encourage you to explore it, and it'll be here through January 2024. So if you have special guests that you want to invite to see this, maybe you teach a course, maybe you know somebody who teaches a course that would be very interested in seeing this, spread the news, spread the word. I will even gladly, if it's a class, give them a personal tour. So there's an offer. We are in the wonderful State Historical Society of Missouri building, a place built to serve our state. Serving our state is central to the Missouri School of Journalism's mission, which also aligns with the University of Missouri's mission as a land-grant institution. The exhibit is to serve Missouri residents and all journalists and all visitors. MPW is Missouri's family album of daily life preserved in documentary photography. That's quite a history. And to give us a brief history of MPW is co-director emeritus Jim Curley. Jim Curley and David Reese were at the helm of MPW from 2001 to 2019. We joke about Jim's ability to recall towns, years, photographers, and the stories that came from the different towns. It is in his nature to have the history of the workshop at the ready to correct or confirm what we think or thought was correct. So this anniversary is special as he's been key to uncovering information and connecting people through the archive, documenting more history than ever, and at times making this exhibit literally come to life. Please welcome Jim Curley.
Well, thank you, Brian. Can you hear me? Yeah. Before I start, I want to give a really big shout out and thank you to Brian. It's because of him that we're here today. He's the one who made the contacts with the Missouri State Historical Society. He's the one who wrote the grant that got the funding to be able to frame those photos. So thank you, Brian. Let's see if I can figure out how to run this. What I hope to do in the next few minutes is to give you a very broad strokes history of the Missouri Photo Workshop. Bill, Dwayne, David, Brian will provide more detail. They'll flesh it out. But I want to tell you a little bit about the roots, a little bit about the history, the approach, the philosophy, and give you a glimpse at a few of the images from this incredible, unique, and historic archive. A sizable yet minuscule portion of which is on display across the hall, just a small harvest from what is now an ongoing 75-year-long documentary project. Imagine that. This workshop has been documenting small-town Missouri since 1949. After more than 7 decades, any discussion of the Missouri Photo Workshop has to begin with Cliff and Vi Edom. The Edoms came to Columbia, Missouri, and the university here in 1943, and within that decade, Cliff Edom would go on to coin the word photojournalism and launch 3 programs that continue to resonate with photographers into this new century. The Pictures of the Year contest, the College Photographer of the Year contest, and the Missouri Photo Workshop. Now, anyone familiar with the early years of any of those projects knows that the Edoms came as a couple. And it's true, Vi was a force of nature, and it was her contacts that were built up through her work with the Missouri Press Association that really opened a lot of doors in those early years of the workshop. That's Vi there in the middle, and she's flanked on the left by Bill Kirkendall, who you'll hear from momentarily, and Dwayne Daly. They took over directly from Cliff and Vi as co-directors in 1986 for the 38th workshop, I believe. But I can still hear Vi at this is the 50th workshop, 1998 in Boonville. And I can still hear Vi saying, well, fellas, I made it to the first 50. The rest of them are up to you. But back to 1949. And news photography was still in its infancy. Picture magazines like Look and Life were just beginning to tap the storytelling potential of the medium. It was just a year before, 1948, when W. Eugene Smith published his country doctor story in Life magazine. But in 1949, journalism schools and most newspapers were still pushing the grip and grin approach to photography. And as Cliff would say, in most newsrooms, photographers were still viewed as, quote, reporters with their brains knocked out. Searching for a better model, Edom turned to the powerful photographs of the Farm Security Administration. Led by Roy Stryker, FSA photographers like Dorothea Lange, Arthur Rothstein, Walker Evans, and Russell Lee visually interpreted the problems facing America during the Great Depression. They put a face and a place on the environmental and economic tragedy that disinherited thousands of Americans. It was a propaganda effort, to be sure, designed by President Franklin Roosevelt and his Brain Trust to spur Congress into action, and it worked. It helped spur passage of much of the New Deal legislation of the 1930s. But it was also in the 1940s that Edom read Sherwood Anderson's book, Hometown, which used a lot of FSA photographs as illustrations. And it was then he began to wonder how he could use the same approach to tell the stories of small Missouri towns. Years later, he also admitted some selfish motives helped shape his workshop idea. I wanted to learn from the greats in photojournalism, he said, but most of them were in the East, so I decided to bring them here. By the end of that decade, Edom had enlisted Roy Stryker to help flush out and develop his idea. If another name were given for our workshop, he wrote in a February 1949 letter to Stryker, I think I would like to call it a think shop. That is exactly what I hope it turns out to be. It seems fated that Stryker and Edom would come together, wrote Howard Chapnick, the former president of Black Star Photo Agency and himself a veteran of more than a dozen photo workshops. They were kindred spirits, he wrote, united in the commitment to the importance of documentary photography. In later years, Edom lured FSA veterans like Arthur Rothstein and especially Russell Lee to the heartland, and they played a large role in honing the approach for future workshops. But that first experiment took place the last week of May 1949. The idea was to tell the story of a town in photos. That town was Columbia, Missouri. Joining Stryker on that first staff were Harold Corsini, Russ Arnold, Stanley Kalish, and John Morris. 23 participants, including college students, photography educators, working newspaper photographers, and a 50-year-old Kansas City housewife made up that first roster of photographers. The thinking rather than the making side of photography was the theme of that workshop, wrote Stan Kalish in an article for the National Press Photographer. He went on to say that everyone caught the spirit of Edom's new approach, he wrote, the why rather than the how. The problem of the workshop, wrote participant Otha Spencer in another article for the Quill, was shoot a picture story of Columbia, Missouri. It was as simple as that. At least it seemed that way until the actual work of planning the story began. Then it became complicated. Columbia, instead of being a simple college town, developed into an intricate mixture of educators, businessmen, students, farmers, traders, and the ordinary stand-on-the-street character common to every town. But Columbia, upon closer inspection, was a city with a race problem. And being situated right on the Mason-Dixon line, the problem was more than ever evident. Here's a photo taken probably less than 6 blocks from where we're sitting right now. David Reese, my good friend, colleague, and co-conspirator at nearly 20 Missouri photo workshops, likes to say that what photographers do at MPW is hold up a mirror to the community. And sometimes the reflections can be troubling. For 75 years now, more than 2,500 photographers have held that mirror up in 51 small Missouri communities. A map of Missouri with those towns marked is a shotgun blast of dots. Now, small town life has always been romanticized, and Edom and Stryker knew that, but there was more than nostalgia involved in choosing small Missouri towns as workshop sites. The genius of Cliff Edom, wrote Chapnick, lay in his understanding that by bringing budding photographers to the small towns of Missouri, he was providing them with a laboratory that could serve as a microcosm of life in small town America everywhere. He recognized that in these small towns, the people would be more approachable for photographers. In these small towns was the stuff of life where people lived close to the land in the heartland of America, where the idyllic qualities of rural life were counterbalanced by the problems of poverty, disease, alcoholism, racism, many complications that affect all communities. Over the years, the focus of MPW has evolved. After a few years, Edom and his faculty team shifted emphasis from one large story of a town to individually researched and photographed stories or essays by each participant. One thing that stayed consistent was the philosophy. Edom and his faculty teams continued to demand that photographers show truth with a camera. Set up or pose photographs were not tolerated. If he made no other contribution to photojournalism, Chapnick said, Edom will be remembered as a man who brooked no tampering with the integrity of the journalistic photograph. To Edom, honesty was a sacred trust. You didn't organize, manipulate, or manage a photograph. You didn't make a photograph, you took it. You photographed the reality of things as they were, not the way you preconceived them or would have liked them to be. MPW photographers have used that approach to show how and where a small-town Missouri works, and they've shown the worker who's just lost his job. Their photos show us how generations have mined and quarried the land of Missouri. They show us the people who have worked the land, those people who have a special relationship with the earth, who have lived their whole lives on one piece of land and still find a way to squeeze a living out of it. And they show us how the children in these small towns learn and grow. Their photographs show us the importance of family in the fabric of a community. They've shown the passion of young love and the enduring love shown after a lifetime lived together. Along the way, MPW adapted to the changes in technology. Photographers moved from 4x5 film and speed graphics to miniature cameras like the 2¼ Rolleiflexes that soon shrunk to 35 millimeter. But no matter what camera, what film they used, they continued to come away with images that show the magic, the details of everyday life. MPW went color for the 50th workshop in Boonville in 1998, and within 4 years adapted to the digital format used today. But photographers continued to find and tell the most amazing stories in these small towns. It continues to blow me away, the stories these photographers hunt up. Stories like the story of Doug Duchesne, a butcher near Fulton. Of Spirit, a Herman middle schooler who says her life was perfect until she turned 11. Of Sarah and Akram Nasser, Palestinian immigrants adjusting to a new life and high school in a new country. Of Jason Nelson, who hoped to start a new life after his release from prison. Of step-siblings Luca Nichols and Jillianne Matthews. Luca asked Jillianne to join him on the all-male 5th grade Little League football team with him to, quote, make sure I don't get crushed because I'm so small, he said. The story of single women in a Mennonite community, one of whom bought her own car earned from money made from babysitting. Of Ida Morris, known as Miss Punny or Aunt Punny to neighbors and family, who created and maintained Mom's Garden, a neighborhood oasis across the street from her home. Of the Viramontes family, immigrants from Mexico making a new home and a place for themselves in Cuba, Missouri. Of Charles Bradley, who at 94 was still working the 450-acre farm near Platte City that has been in his family since 1883. Of Phil Ponder, the large tattooed manager of the Eldon Animal Control Center. And of Jane Perez, the queen of Moon Dance Farm. The one thing that hasn't changed is the workshop's approach. Participants are still challenged to show truth with their cameras, and it's still a workshop where the researching, the thinking side of photography is emphasized. It's still a workshop that stresses the why rather than the how. Thank you.
Has anyone been injured doing this yet? No? Okay, that's good.
Individuals will give away sort of what they're going to do, and they will become predictable if you spend enough time watching them and observing them and seeing how they behave and how they act with others. Like, you know, people's space, how close they stand to someone else, if they touch other people, if there's interaction there, you kind of wait for those moments.
I could say, well, how do you get a perfect shot? I don't think there's any such thing.
You have to have context, you have to report, you have to know what it is that you're looking at, why you're there, and then you have to manage your relationship with people so that once you get somewhere with your camera, once that camera comes out, I can be focused on photography.
I'm just in the moment of whatever it is, and so I'm shooting hoping that all that framing and composition is still working because the moment is more important. So I just chase the moment.
That video included Alyssa Shukar to start out with. And Alyssa, for the past 2 years, was co-director with me because it takes a village to run MPW, and to have 2 leaders really helps. So that was Alyssa Shukar. She is a freelancer and a staffer in Washington, D.C., and she travels the United States on all kinds of great stories. And really wonderful to have her as a co-director the past 2 years. Why was there target practice going on? Because an element of the Missouri Photo Workshop is the character of the headquarters that we live in for the week. That was in Mountain Grove, and upstairs in this event center, there was this archery range. Go figure. And you know, in the previous one with the elevator pitch, where Jackie was in it, there was an elevator in this wonderful building at the retired Kemper Military School in Boonville. So inspiration strikes. If there's an elevator, let's make an elevator pitch video. If there's an archery range, maybe we can parlay that into a conversation about getting the shot. So that's why it happens. There's a rhyme and a reason, right? And also, thank you so much, Jim, for the history. There are so many photographs that went through that show, by the way. If there were 100 photographs, that he showed, and I think there were more. Right there, if anyone has a great idea for a podcast, right there's 100 podcasts, Jim, and a photo. And that would be a wonderful idea, exploring the Missouri archives. So anyway, thank you, Jim. That was wonderful. Hey, we have a special guest here today, and I'm going to introduce him. But I have to say, I met him sometime in the late 1990s. I answered the call from Professor Bill Kirkendall. He was looking for someone to adjunct teach the Advanced Lighting Techniques class in the J School's photojournalism program. Back then, the class was called J341, and back then it was all slide film, E6, which came with its own strict rules on exposure and unforgiving exposure, I might add. Bill Kirkendall so I appreciate that. He gave me my first collegiate teaching opportunity. That's one. Bill Kirkendall has impacted thousands through small and large gestures over the decades. Through the big photo competitions that he led, like Pictures of the Year, CPOY, and obviously MPW, his impact on the industry is worldwide. It was Bill and his co-director, Dwayne Daly, who received the keys, so to speak, to the workshop, handed over to them directly from the founders, Cliff and Vi Edom. Dwayne passed in the spring of 2020, not long after the 71st workshop in Boonville. Bill is our direct MPW connection to Cliff and Vi. It is with great honor that we invite Bill to help mark this 75th year of the workshop that you have helped run. Bill.
Thank you, Brian. Yeah. Well, I'm thrilled to see you all here, too. I've seen a lot of familiar faces this morning, and I've gotten a few lovely hugs. I'm addicted to lovely hugs, male or female, doesn't matter. You'll notice that the number here of the attendees are wearing a jacket and a tie, and I don't want to be disrespectful, but you have to understand I live in Maine now, and we have to sign a document when we cross the border that says we will never appear in public in a coat and tie. So, but the good news here is that this cap does qualify as formal attire. You'll hear a little overlap here with what Jim so articulately said. And really lovely, lovely presentation. Those pictures really took me back, and you did a great job of curating that archive. So here goes. It was 1943 when Clifton C. Edom moved his wife Vi and daughter Vimy from the southwest Missouri town of Aurora to Columbia. Vi had been hired as assistant manager of the Missouri Press Association, which she would serve for more than 30 years. Cliff would be hired by the School of Journalism to make engravings for the student newspaper, the Columbia Missourian. In Aurora, Cliff had served as instructor and publisher for the Tassape organization. Soon, he would begin a distinguished career drawing upon his experiences at Tassape that would establish his reputation as an innovative educator and entrepreneur and champion of high professional standards. The Missouri School of Journalism is unique among colleges and universities in that its faculty members believe that the best way to master the journalistic process is to work in a production environment under the guidance of seasoned professionals. As has been reported, on its first day of classes in 1908, they published a newspaper, the student-reported, faculty-edited Columbia Missourian. In this environment, Cliff's production skills served him well. His lack of academic credentials did not hold him back. However, eventually he would complete a bachelor's degree and, with the support of J School Dean Walter Williams, join the faculty. Cliff's teaching focus went beyond the mechanics of engraving pictures to emphasize the complementary reporting relationships between writing and photography. Before long, journalists throughout the nation were noticing what he was doing. They soon adopted his name for this new discipline, photojournalism. Cliff and Vi worked together as a team In addition to establishing the world's first accredited college curriculum in photojournalism, in 1943, the Edams founded the 50 print exhibition of news and feature pictures, which later became the Pictures of the Year contest. In 1944, to celebrate the scholarship of student photojournalists, they created Kappa Alpha Mu, a national photojournalism honorary fraternity. Chapters opened on several other college campuses. Then came the College Photographer of the Year contest in 1945 and the Missouri Photo Workshop in 1949. On the Edom team, Cliff was the visionary, the motivator, the advocator. Vi was the logistician, the organizer, the one who made things happen. Cliff's dependence on Vi was widely observed. Pros who worked with them often remarked, tongue-in-cheek, that Cliff would take on any job that Vi could do. Cliff understood that the programs they were creating would attract to his classroom talented and ambitious photojournalists, both students and established pros. No other institution at that time offered anything comparable. The National Press Photographers Association was not established until 6 years after the MU News and Features photo contest. The welcome mat was always out for professionals passing through Cliff's neighborhood. They flocked to Columbia to show their work and participate in photo critiques with students, usually in the Edom living room, long into the nights. Cliff's genius lay in his shrewd and timely recognition that powerful forces were building within the community of camera reporters. These motivated and capable pros responded to Cliff's call. He was offering ways to learn from each other, to take pride in their respective achievements, and to seek solidarity in combating the disrespect that they perceived among many peers. The writers, editors, and layout people who made their assignments, cropped and captioned their pictures, and generally treated them as second-class citizens. Cliff's work at Missouri actualized the catchphrase expressed in the Kevin Costner movie Field of Dreams, "Build it and they will come." Come they did, and have continued to do so now for more than 75 years. Another brilliant innovation that Cliff could claim dated from his years at the Aurora School of Photo Engraving. Tassipay was the creation of respected photographer and inventor Charles S. Martz. Martz had founded an industry based upon the sale of portable photo engraving plants that were affordable and relatively easy to use. His primary market was the small weekly papers that numbered in the tens of thousands in the early 1940s. However, there was a chicken or egg problem. In order to justify purchase of an engraving plant, a newspaper had to have on staff a photographer who was competent to use it. So Martz created for his clients a school to teach not only the making of photo engravings, but the principles of journalistic photography. Cliff had completed the Tassipay School himself and soon began teaching camera operations and directing Tassipay's workshops. He was like Meredith Willson's Music Man, who sold instruments with the promise to teach buyers how to play them. In order to sell engraving plants, one had to teach customers how to take pictures. Cliff would draw on these experiences years later as he established himself as America's preeminent photojournalism educator. Cliff Edom retired from Mizzou's classrooms and stepped down from the directorship of Pictures of the Year in the College Photographer of the Year contest in 1972. That was the year that Angus McDougall and I first came to Mizzou. Actually, I taught at Mizzou on 2 separate occasions. My first gig was brief, just 2 years. I returned in 1986, following a stint as a freelance photographer, publication designer, and newspaper photo director. And I worked there until I retired from Mizzou in 2000. Despite the differences in our ages, Angus McDougall and I were soulmates, disruptors, determined to shake up the word people, photo people hierarchy by inspiring photojournalists to add editing and design to their skill sets. It was a time when offset printing and cold type composition provided greater quality and flexibility than had been possible when hot metal, type, and steel engravings have provided the only means of putting ink on paper since the days of Gutenberg. I had been a beneficiary of these powerful new tools while working at the Daily Globe in Worthington, Minnesota. My first year out of the University of Minnesota J School, I had won the title Newspaper Photo Editor of the Year in the MU NPPA Pictures of the Year contest. Mac had observed what we were doing in Worthington and had included 2 of my prize-winning layouts in his book, Visual Impact in Print. We met when we both were speaking at an NPPA conference in Iowa. I guess Mike liked what I said because he invited me to join him on the Mizzou faculty. He was about to succeed Cliff as photojournalism sequence director, but he didn't want to take this job unless he had a supportive colleague. I never had considered becoming a teacher, but the opportunity to work with McDougall was too tempting. I left Worthington to join him in Columbia. Mac and I worked together for 2 years before I stepped down to launch a freelance photo and publication design career, relocating to my home state of West Virginia. When Mac retired in 1982, 10 years later, J School Dean Roy Fisher offered me his position. I agonized over this, but declined, and instead went to Seattle as director of photography of the Seattle Times. I did so because I could see that the offset printing revolution that had created so many editing and management opportunities on smaller papers for me and others were evolving and providing more powerful printing and design tools for large circulation metros. Many of those who were surfing this wave of innovation were former Mizzou students, including Rich Schulman, Kathy Andrusevich, and Randy Cox. All 3 had made the most of these opportunities right out of college while working at the Coffeyville Journal in Coffeyville, Kansas. They incidentally patterned their engraving operation on what we were doing in Worthington. So there's an incestuous stream that runs through this landscape. Today, as I think you must know, Randy is being inducted posthumously into the Missouri Photojournalism Hall of Fame. His classmate and lifelong partner, Joni Carlin, is with us. Joni, good to see you. I went to Seattle because I foresaw that the improvements in printing technologies would have dramatic implications for large circulation metros and, by extension, for college curricula. Indeed, the explosion in creativity on papers in Pittsburgh, Norfolk, Seattle, New York, Washington, and many other cities ushered in what I believe was truly the golden age of photojournalism. During the years that I was in Seattle, Cliff and Vi had continued to manage the photo workshops. Soon after I arrived back in Columbia, the Edams proposed that my friend, Ag Extension photojournalist Dwayne Daly, and I should succeed them. Dwayne and I had stayed close while I lived in West Virginia and Seattle. I had helped him with the Agricultural Editor's Photo School, which was patterned on the Missouri Photo Workshop during 11 of those years. And Jim, didn't you play some role in a little bit? That's what I understood. Dwayne and I accepted the Edom proposal. We would continue as workshop co-directors until I took early retirement and relocated to Maine 14 years later. We then passed the workshop torch to Dave Reese and Jim Curley, who now have passed it to Brian Kratzer and Alyssa Schuker. The professionals whom Cliff and Vi recruited played a huge role in defining the workshop. From the beginning, its instructors were paragons of action and leadership. Roy Stryker and Russell Lee of the Farm Security Administration are credited with introducing best practices for shooters and editors. Howard Chapnick of Black Star Publishing Company and Bob Gilka of the Milwaukee Journal and National Geographic, and Rich Clarkson of the Topeka Capital Journal and National Geographic were widely recognized as clever prospectors for talent and mentors of up-and-coming pros. Sandra Eisert of the Louisville Courier Journal delivered brilliant critiques within minutes of sitting down with a photographer and his or her portfolio. Many workshop instructors had formed their values and habits in Mizzou classrooms. Wilbur Bill Garrett editor of National Geographic, and Bill Epridge, staff photographer for Life and Sports Illustrated, are just two examples of Cliff's many exceptional disciples. In the beginning, workshop teaching methods were largely a response to the personalities of workshop students. Few had enjoyed the benefits of post-secondary education. Many had grown up in blue-collar communities where work habits were often autocratic. World War II had only recently ended. Many workshoppers had served in the war and were used to a military regimen. These factors influenced the methods faculty members used to make their points. The workshop process often was described as a boot camp, where students were broken down psychologically in order to make them receptive to what faculty members were saying. Although harsh, the process worked, and workshop alumni usually praised the experience and claimed that overall they'd never been treated better. This approach continued well into the 1970s. By the time Dwayne and I took over, sophistication of the student body had increased. Most now came with bachelor's degrees. Many had completed or were working on a master's. Women were much more numerous. The no-nonsense, get this great approach could still be effective. But an over-the-top, in-your-face strategy, especially if implemented as an act of showmanship instead of as a response to stubborn resistance, could yield a counterproductive outcome. These next generation students responded to a more thoughtful, reasoned, and responsive approach. The faculty members that Dwayne and I recruited didn't pull their punches. However, they tended to engage students more intellectually. Most first-generation faculty members could do this too, but some were loath to change what had worked for them in the past. Dwayne and I began imagining a curriculum that was more diverse, more adaptable. We looked for teachers who could relate to students on any level. Gender balance had always been poor. We added more women. In no case were standards lowered. We had no trouble finding qualified instructors. Many whom we recruited had been living the professionalism that we wanted to emulate. Some would become workshop regulars, including Dennis Dimick, Kim Kamenich, Melissa Farlow, Randy Olson, Sarah Lean, and Bill Maher, to name a few. Many of these next-generation instructors brought sophisticated design skills and management experience. Almost immediately, this altered approach was becoming an incubator for a new breed of multimedia professionals. This evolution has continued until today. Successful workshops require more than a population of motivated shooters and instructors. Contributions made by the Mizzou undergraduate and graduate student body cannot be overstated. From the beginning, Cliff relied heavily on MU students to process film, make contact sheets, print enlargements, and lay out exhibitions, in addition to wrangling chemicals, tanks, enlargers, and all the paraphernalia necessary to support the week's activities. Some former student workers returned year after year to supervise logistics and direct the crews of worker bees that labored far into the night to keep the process humming. Photo industry manufacturers provided essential resources, film and chemicals, camera equipment, and funding. Kodak was a generous underwriter for many years. In 1998, Fuji Photo Film signed on as a sponsor of the workshops, and the medium switched from black and white to color. Fuji's enthusiasm was exceptional. In addition to providing 20 rolls of film to each participant and a few to each faculty member, Fuji provided high-capacity processors, scanners, and digital printers to produce enlargements that would be exhibited to the town. Looked like Ringling Brothers when they came to town. They had so much stuff. This investment in resources expanded the concepts of making and editing pictures into areas that were never possible before. As the years passed, the costs of running the workshop increased. At the outset, budgeting had been rather vague. Workshop faculty had rarely been reimbursed for all of their costs. Cliff would send the instructor what he thought they needed. It frequently fell short. The instructors had to dip into their own pockets to cover airfare and meals. Cliff and Vi took nothing for themselves and often wrote checks to bring things into balance. When Dwayne and I took over, we made sure that everyone broke even. Cliff and Vi always were made welcome and received the same level of support as the other faculty members. Others who invested heavily in the workshop were the host newspapers, members of the Missouri Press Association, which had been a booster of the workshop from the very beginning. Prior to workshop week, the host newspapers would run stories preparing the community for the army of photographers who would soon be descending upon them. They reassured their readers that our photographers would be respectful, but they would be asking story subjects to open their homes and workplaces, their very lives, to the photographer's scrutiny. Traditionally, on Thursday of workshop week, the host paper would provide a feast, usually of barbecued beef, pork, and chicken, with all the fixins. In the early days, picnic day usually featured a touch football game between faculty, staff, and workshop students. This was gradually abandoned after several faculty members sustained significant injuries. Given the demands that the workshops placed on physical endurance, Dwayne and I were not sorry to see this tradition fade into the past. Perhaps the most valuable members of the workshop staff were the program coordinators who handled all the details of workshop planning, setup, and operations, in addition to all of the details connected with POI and CPOI. Lisa Barnes served our programs brilliantly for many years, and then was succeeded by Catherine Mohaski, who continued the tradition with distinction. Catherine is here this morning. Catherine, would you please take a bow? Where are you? I understand Lisa's not well. She got some serious illness, which she's had for a long time. Wish she could be here. She would really love to see you. Criteria for becoming a workshopper has always been flexible. Although most are either current or aspiring professionals, Dwayne and I screened applicants watching for evidence of professional intent. Thus, we were thrilled with how high school educators Bill and Marcia Hankins applied what they learned in the 1989 workshop to their teaching, reporting, and community service. In recognition of this work, Bill was inducted into the Missouri Photojournalism Hall of Fame in 2008. Where are you, Bill? There you go. Although exhaustive planning went into every aspect of workshop operations, there frequently were surprises. Like the year that a workshopper thought she was covering the story of a young unmarried couple with infant child, struggling heroically to make a go of it. Only late in the week did she realize that the young man had allegedly been dealing drugs. And the local cops were just waiting for us to stop taking pictures to arrest him. They had heard that the photography ended on Thursday afternoon at a certain time when they were preparing to go into action. Unfortunately for them, when they approached the young man, he hopped in his car and headed for workshop headquarters where his girlfriend and baby were waiting. As he pulled into the parking lot and exited his vehicle, the cops took him into custody. Although the deadline to stop shooting had passed, our intrepid photographer, who was watching all of this, still had film in her camera. As she moved into position, the young woman, babe in arms, leaned across the hood of her lover's car to plant a kiss on his lips as the police cuffed his hands behind him. As we would say in Maine, it made a hell of a picture. We granted her a deadline extension. Statistics tell us now how likely it is that a photographer will stumble upon good photo opportunities. Italian economist Vilfredo Pareto showed in 1896 that 80% of the value found in any set of circumstances will be contained in 20% of the samples. That means if you just hang out and hope for the best, the odds are 4-1 against you seeing anything particularly useful. Witness the Smith story country doctor that Jim mentioned. Smith was said to have scoured the country for weeks to find a doctor who was living the narrative that he wanted to photograph. Once he had found his idealized subject, the flow of meaningful pictures was unstoppable. It all boils down to this. I thought over the years, what is the meaning of all this? How can you condense it to the simplest form? And what I came up with is two things. Show people doing the things that make them newsworthy. Show the impact of issues on people's lives. Okay? And that's a mantra that I've used in basic photo classes as long as I've been teaching in Maine and Missouri. Remember, there are two major sources of power in every newsroom. First is the person who makes assignments. Choice of subject, timing, location of coverage, coaching of the subject determine what the photographer will have to work with. More often than not, the situation will be far from ideal unless the photographer is involved in subject selection and scheduling. That's just the reality of the industry. Second is the person who selects, crops, captions, sizes, and positions the image on the page. Legibility, accuracy, meaning, information value, the powers of juxtaposition, all are at the mercy of these individuals. And as newspaper staffs shrink in number, more and more often, the editor charged with doing these things is not the person who produced the images. If for no other reason, this is why we need the Missouri Photo Workshops. Although none are here today, I'd like to bear witness again to the tremendous generosity of Mizzou's corporate friends, without whose support Mizzou's curriculum and professional programs would not have been possible. Friends that include Ray DeMullen, Paul Curtis, and Ken Lassiter of Eastman Kodak. Ken got us $300,000 when Lee Hill Halls was being planned, and that $300,000 was used to anchor the photojournalism program's residence in the ground floor of that building. So, Jim Atwater, former editor of Life magazine and dean of the School of Journalism, was hugely helpful in that and went with me to Rochester to lobby for that money with Ray DeMullen. So it was a pivotal event in the history of the program, I believe. Carol Fisher of Nikon is a wonderful, wonderful. She's the lady who showed up with the big jar of M&Ms, peanuts, which was a great way to attract workshoppers, students, and faculty to her desk. Dave Metz of Canon USA and Tom Curley of Fuji Photo Film. We should always be grateful for and acknowledge their contributions. Now comes the time to pass the torch again, because they have been well schooled in the principles and practices of past photo workshops, and because they continue to be supported by a community of dedicated and unselfish professionals and generous and enthusiastic corporations. I am confident that Brian and Alyssa are well positioned to continue what Cliff and Vi began. I congratulate them for being chosen to carry on this noble mission, and I wish them well.
Wow, thank you. Thank you very much. Very much appreciate that. And because you can't really follow that up very well, I think maybe now is a good time to take a 10-minute break. That's me scofflawing out of having to follow that. Coffee, bagels. We'll come back. When you start hearing the really cool bass tones for the intro to the video, come back. We'll introduce you to a video called The Mind's Eye. Thank you.
pictures either coming together or falling apart. And it's about, that's what this workshop is about, is how to find that little moment of convergence that allows the light, the moment, and the gesture to get on the same wavelength to become the most powerful message. There's something about this that you only learn in Missouri, and it's very specific to a frame-by-frame workshop that allows you to spend this time observing yourself in action and allowing, and that's what that frame-by-frame really does, is allows you to observe you.
Beautiful. It worked as intended. The narrator of that is Kim Kamenich, who's been on the faculty at the Missouri Photo Workshop many times, maybe 20, 22, 25. He came back this year at Sedalia to help us out on the documentary and rangefinder team and kind of be a creative advisor, because he's a very creative individual with lots of great ideas. So that video I end up using sometimes in lectures in class, because he's talking about the editing process. So this video was shown at MPW 69 in Eldon in 2017, and it was the third short of the week that year, and it premiered at the perfect point in the week when the editing process between the photographers and the faculty was beginning to get more intense. So it was a helpful centering documentary at the perfect point. So everything hopefully has a purpose and a perfect timing. Speaking of perfect timing, at the end, this is hot off the press. It's the State Historical Society of Missouri's seasonal. This is out here all fall, folks, and we're on the cover. So very cool photograph. You saw this earlier in Jim Curley's presentation. So this is kind of a cool deal. I'm really proud that the workshop earned its keep on the cover to honor what's going on across the hall. Someone had mentioned earlier about obtaining funding and making this happen, and they gave me credit, but really I want to deflect the credit from me to Alicia Boudwin. Thank you, Alicia, who was an exquisite hire. I think our dean, Dean Kurpius, the Missouri School of Journalism, very forward-thinking dean, and is leading the school quite well. We just got done with our accreditation process, which is a fun process where people come in and study us closely and then report on us. But the dean, it's wonderful that you are here to help empower people like me that would have never applied for grants before. So this is really a direct reflection of the leadership of the school and the fact that we have people like Alicia to help people like me do things like that. So big thing, it's a team effort. All of this is very clear. So thank you very much. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And hey, since I mentioned money, this little sheet here, right, has a cool couple QR codes. And so let me introduce to you Stephanie Gray. She is a graduate of the J School and has fond memories of working in the Missourian newsroom. One side of her family hails from the Missouri Boot Hill and the other from St. Joe. So she not only understands us, but is also the people who are shown in the Missouri Photo Workshop photos. Now she works in the J School in our advancement office. Her work is important because she connects with donors and alumni who are people who help keep the legacies running, the lights on. So here's Stephanie with an important message. Thank you, Stephanie.
Good morning, everyone. Like Brian said, I am a very proud graduate of the Missouri School of Journalism, and I promise I will not be putting out an offering plate today, but I am here to tell you that my job is to secure philanthropic support from alumni and friends for the School of Journalism. So here's my little pitch for you to consider including the Missouri Photo Workshop in your philanthropic plans. I'm a little too short for this. I'm gonna have to bend this down. As you're already aware, since 1949, MPW has been documenting rural Missouri and training top photojournalism talent in the process. And efforts of this duration and magnitude do not happen by accident, because programs like MPW require a tremendous amount of resources. While the workshop is a program of the Missouri School of Journalism, it simply can't happen without additional private support every year. These faculty pour themselves into this work each year to ensure an experience that shines a light on these small towns and big stories, but their effort isn't enough. So we will always need additional financial support to help fund participants, meals, photo equipment, computers, ink, printers, paper, hotels, journalism student staffers that come in and help, probably some snacks, especially if they're there, probably first aid kit or two, I would imagine, along the way. And there's stories about arrests, so I don't think this fund can support bail, but beyond that, there's a tremendous need here. I hope you all will consider how you might be able to help support MPW in the future. Gifts of all kind are always welcome and helpful and are certainly not limited to these things, but we have options for monthly pledges. We have options for stock transfers if you would like to consider a bequest or a planned gift. Brian is wonderful at telling the story of MPW, and I can help bring money in so he can keep doing that. So he has business cards of mine. The QR code will work, and that is an opportunity for you to get some information about what giving might look like. It's fully tax deductible with the University of Missouri, so that is an extra perk along the way. And I'm honored to help you if that's something that is of interest for you as you consider your philanthropy, or you have your friends, I don't know if there's a live stream out there, your friends, you can share this message. We're happy to tell this tale and to include anybody who wants to support this program. So private support of the workshop is going to help continue another 75 years of MPW and beyond, hopefully. So with that being said, I welcome your philanthropic consideration. So thank you for thinking about it, and thanks for letting me come give a pitch. And if you want to pass a hat, we can do that, but probably another time. Thank you.
Like so many other J School and MPW alumni, I am honored to have worked with David Reese and am a better journalist and professor because of our time together. A champion of photojournalism, of thoughtful feedback, critique, and generosity, highly respected by students and professionals and fellow professors, David has this way of getting so much accomplished with great impact in a way that is full of class and respect. Here is David Reese.
Hey, thanks very much. Great to see you all. I just wanted to follow up on Stephanie. The endowment that we established in the workshop now has $131,264.25 in it. And so we could move that number. And the Curly, when we were doing some photo editing for the workshop for the exhibit, we were looking at pictures, and Jim says, there's an awful lot of good barbershop pictures here, and there's an awful lot of cat and dog pictures that are pretty neat. Anyway, he had this notion of creating these cards, and so the cards are available in the gift shop. And it's very modest, but that's one way in which to support the workshop and also to spread the word. We have the, let's see, barbershop series, the cats and dogs series, or is it the dog and cat series? Cats and dogs series. Main Street series, and the African American experience. So it's a really nice, 4 nice sets of cards. And it's nice to see Dean Kirby's here. Thanks so much for coming with in your busy schedule. When Cliff conceived of the Missouri Photo Workshop, this think shop, as Jim told us earlier, and had conversations with Roy Stryker and finagled the university and J School administrators. I know about finagling J School administrators. Into going along with the notion and gotten a group of faculty together and students for the workshop in Columbia in May of 1949. I wonder if he was thinking about just a workshop, one and done? Cliff was a grand thinker and imaginer. Of course, that the workshop experience has continued and that it has created an unparalleled archive of small-town Missouri is thanks not to just to Cliff and Vi, but to all the workshop photographers and faculty members and student volunteers and sponsors for these 75 years. Cliff and Vi directed the first 37. Bill Kirkendall and Dwayne Daly took over its leadership in 1986 during a 100-year flood in Hannibal and led it for 15 years. When Jim Curley and I were handed the reins just 2 weeks after September 11th in 2001, we were eager to contribute to the living, breathing entity that is the workshop. We didn't know if we could beat Bill and Dwayne's service of 15 years. We knew there was no hope of besting Cliff and Vi, but we did manage 19 years before handing it off to Brian and Alyssa Shukar, who took over as the COVID-19 pandemic swept the world and had to conduct a hometown workshop for 2 years, essentially a virtual workshop where everyone worked from their own homes and communicated electronically in the Missouri Photo Workshop style. Is there a connection between disaster and changing leadership of MPW? Jim and I knew we had big shoes to fill. Like Bill, I was leading and teaching the MU photojournalism program and busy with teaching and POI director duties. Jim, like Dwayne, worked for MU's Ag Extension editor's office and was level-headed and sensible and a natural historian. We were a pretty good match to each other and to the workshop, as it turned out. We recognized the historic significance and the presence the workshop had in the world of photojournalism, that it helped to create and shape many careers, that it had challenged participants not just in their picture making, but in a very real sense the souls of the people who were pushing the button. We knew we had to keep our knees bent in respect to the rapidly changing technology, and sometimes had to respond to corporate sponsors' demands that if they were to support the workshop, we would have to go digital, perhaps sooner than we felt comfortable doing, as we did in our second year in Fulton when Fuji pushed our hand. We knew that to keep the spirit and methodology of the workshop intact, we would want to continue to work with seasoned and experienced MPW faculty, but that we would want to freshen the group of people who serve as faculty, to provide greater diversity in all the ways that are valuable to all of us. This was difficult then, as it is now, because there was no money to pay or offer honorarium to faculty, so it made it harder for freelance photographers to be able to afford to work with us. We knew that our primary function as MPW co-directors was to create an environment conducive to creativity and hard work, and that ultimately would help photographers to succeed. We wanted the workshop to be supportive but challenging. The workshop participants live in a bubble, as Marianne Golan is fond of saying. During the workshop, we're a tight-knit community united by motivation to become better researchers, visual storytellers, and to be more responsible to ourselves and to our subjects about motives in making pictures. And there's great access to the renowned faculty who otherwise are almost unapproachable because of their busy schedules and hierarchy at, for instance, National Geographic Time, Washington Post, and New York Times. The notion of community operates on several planes. First, within the workshop itself, and we embrace the towns hosting us. Can you name them in order, Jim? Kearney, Fulton, Louisiana, Herman, Marshall, Moberly, Chillicothe, St. James, Festus, and Crystal City, Macon, Clinton, Troy, Trenton, Platte City, Perryville, Cuba, Eldon, Mountain Grove, Boonville. Then the idea of community expands beyond the workshop, beyond the town, to the greater world of photojournalists, to wherever they work throughout the world. The MPW ethic of honesty and integrity and visual storytelling is implicit in all that transpires, and it's evident here today. When photographers immerse themselves into subjects' lives, it can be very rewarding, a privilege that the people being photographed grant the photographer. We see pictures of birth, we see pictures of death, we see pictures of everything in between. Usually it is a mutually affirming and reaffirming experience for the photographer and the subject. Only once did Jim and I have to explain to a photographer that if the district attorney got his way with the sheriff, that this side of the river was Missouri and the other side was Illinois, and made sure he knew where the bridge was. It ended out okay. For several years, a major topic of discussion and some arguments in our MPW faculty meetings was whether the workshop needed to adapt to the multimedia world. Should we train photographers to gather audio and become multimedia producers? Or should we resist the pressures to be current and stay with our tried and true, our bedrock approach to photojournalism? We opted to maintain the course, and it has proven to be a good decision, I think. Multimedia and video photojournalists often come to MPW because of the ground truthing, essential photojournalism elementism that is the workshop. Our emphasis is getting close to people, getting inside their lives, building trust, telling their stories without the bells and whistles. The refining of the workshop approach and its method is a continual process. Each year, looking to see what presentation topics helped photographers achieve success, finding subjects, building and maintaining relationships, the aesthetics of a good photograph, how to form a visual narrative from individual pictures. Sometimes circumstances dictate change. Like in Kearney in 2001, when because of the September 11th events, we were not able to be at the, many faculty were not able to be at the workshop because they had work to do at home. We slimmed faculty teams from 3 to 2 so the photographers would have more time with their faculty. This seemed to be a good idea and offer some efficiency in terms of faculty coming to agreement with each other and the students about the direction of a story, but was perhaps a loss in the creative tension that inevitably exists when 3 people are trying to solve a problem, as Jim, Brian, and I know about. We counted it as a success nonetheless and carried it forward to future workshops with faculty teams of 2. The digital age forced an equivalency from what had been the traditional 10 rolls of factory-loaded Tri-X film to 400 frames for the week. And we decided that even though it would be possible to ingest and send to the faculty more images, that the discipline of a limited number of pictures made during the week was important and needed to be preserved. We emphasized no chimping. We monitored the takes of photographers to ensure that there was no deleting. The hallmarks of the workshop are often intimidating, even frightening to photographers. They have to research the community, find their own story ideas, and pitch them to their faculty team for approval before they begin to photograph. Many photographers are used to being handed a slip of paper and told to go make a portrait and then shoot 400 pictures on a single assignment. It is the impeded stream that sings. Dennis Dimmick often reminds us that the Missouri, as over his 25 years, reminds us of Wendell Berry. And in his poem, Our Real Work, says, "We have come to our real journey. The mind that is not baffled is not employed. The impeded stream is the one that sings." Restrictions force creativity, bring people out of their comfort zones, challenge them to see and think differently. A few photographers have reacted to the rules and pace of the workshop with panic, and it can turn easily nasty. Mostly, though, they do follow the guidelines and discover that being thoughtful while making a picture, being thoughtful before making a picture, means that their photography is more meaningful, less responsive, and more informative about what they actually understand about the subject, the situation, the larger story or issue. For some, though, it's a tough lesson. As we celebrate the 75 years of the workshop, it's important to recognize all the people who have really made it happen, who have helped to make the process so transparent that the participants and the faculty hardly know there are any obstructions or difficulties in the river of photographs that come to the computers and to the final exhibit. These are the faculty, of course, some of whom have served for 25 years in unpaid roles. We do cover travel and housing and food, as Bill mentioned. These are also the photojournalism students from Missouri, who in the past would set up wet darkrooms and do film processing, contacting, and then slide making for evening critiques. My first MPW was as a film processor in Nevada, Missouri, where the daughter of then President Gerald Ford, Susan, participated. Only 2 rolls of film suffered any damage during the processing during the week. Guess whose they were? In the digital age now, the crew worked as concierge to ingest images into the system, the vortex workers who rename, sort, backup images into the server space, and then send to the individual faculty teams, the rangefinder, a daily newspaper team, the printing team, which through the week will make 450 exhibit quality 13 by 17 inch prints for the end of the workshop exhibit we invite the town to, and which forms another version of the archive, and the multimedia team, which reports on the workshop and offers nightly insights into the workshop process. Over the years, each workshop crew has been comprised of 15 to 18 MU students and sometimes alumni. they love to come back, and we love to have them back. Many Missouri MU graduate students have served in the front line helping with the many logistics. There's so many to name. Torsten Shelster and Jakob Berry, Caitlin Allier, Ian Malcasian, Coburn Dukart, Lori Duff, Jesse King, too many. I'm leaving out so many. Hanny Hawasley, now the technical director for the workshop, came to Missouri from Syria on a Fulbright fellowship. And the first year he went to the workshop, he was in a complete daze. The second year, he photographed in Trenton. And the next year, he was on the crew. And hereafter, he has been our savior in terms of keeping all the computers organized and making the server behave. Hanny has been a fantastic addition. He's and is now properly the technical director of the workshop. How does the workshop continue? Since 2001, when Jim and I took over, the tuition for the photographers has been $600. And about half the usual 40 photographers are on tuition scholarships. All of them are responsible for their own travel and housing. It's still a relatively affordable experience for them, we believe, and it's still a relevant and important life passage for them. Each year, we receive more than double the number of applicants for the spaces available. It's mostly a word-of-mouth advertisement, and often we, the co-directors and the faculty, wonder why the workshop is so popular, why people will apply year after year until they're accepted. The workshop is ultimately an experience, a life-changing experience for photographers, faculty, and crew. It tests resolve, provides reinforcement and encouragement to use their photography and communication skills toward making a better world. Highfalutin, just the fact. The archive, in some ways, the residue of the workshop. It's the visible part of what has transpired. Sometimes the pictures don't come close to representing the depth and beauty of the experience, but many pictures do show that, and we are blessed to have this repository of images. We're going to talk about how we created the exhibit, and do you want me to do a little bit of an intro for that, or do you want to do your own? Okay.
Those were some of the talking points you mentioned.
Okay. How did we start? How did we begin this? By picking up the mic.
You can hold that one. Hold that one. We can pass it amongst. Not a bad time for if people will have questions about how this goes too. We're welcome to questions
Sure.
as well. Or we can just dive in, as we were sometimes like to do.
75 years, so there's 3 of us, so each of us got 25 years. And we kind of went every third one, so that we would have, each of us would have kind of a representation of the whole 75 years. And sometimes special notice was given, like Brian photographed in Lebanon, and so we gave him Lebanon to look at, so he could look at his own pictures.
That's right.
And each of us would look at those 25 years and look at all the rangefinders, any other news clippings or letters, whatever else was in the archive, and we would do what we called like a wide edit, and maybe be 12, 15, 20 pictures. And then?
We started this, what, in April or March?
It was in the spring, yeah.
It was in the spring. So there might be 30 photographs, 100 photographs. As the years get more modern and we were keeping everything, it used to be the photographers could take their pictures back, their negatives home. And so what we have is pretty much what we have. What's been great is we've, you all and Bill and Dwayne and have done such a great job of maintaining those prints that exist. And so they're stored over at Records Management. So somewhere in the brains, you guys hired graduate students to document, to make copies, digital copies of these prints. Thank goodness, because it would have been impossible to get box after box after box delivered to us to flip through and then copy everything. And you were smart enough to say, hey, let's not only photograph the front, but let's flip the picture over and photograph what's on the back, which is how we correlated some of the information in those captions. On the back is a photographer's name or just a story number. And luckily, you also documented and digitized the rangefinders. so we can go back and see who photographer number 32 may have been and figure out, oh, there's at least a story title.
It was a years-long process that started with Josh Bickle, who I think was the first grad student that was hired and took a deep dive into the archive. But I think the impetus to that was, I think around 2009 or 10, we had an exhibit at the Art and Archaeology that was a really, really wonderful exhibit, Missouri Through Lens and Palette. And it paired Missouri Photo Workshop photos along with drawings, paintings from the collection at the Museum of Art and Archaeology. It was really a wonderful exhibit, but I think that was the impetus to really get going on digitizing the archive. Unfortunately, not all of the backs had the photographers' names, and that was a problem. So there are many photographs in the exhibit that do not have a credit, unfortunately. But with the digital age, you know, for the 100th or 150th workshop celebration, they should be able to tell who all of the photographers are.
So we hope to, in the 75-year retrospective, we hope to represent each town that the workshop had been, where the workshop had been, and we also we're looking to try to find some ways in which to organize it. In this exhibit that Jim was talking about, the Museum of Art and Archaeology, where we work with Mary Pixley, we had four broad topics, four large areas: identity, the land,
Main Street,
and
I think it was just three
of them. And so we started thinking about how would this picture work, you know. And anyway, we had our broad edits, and then we got together and we looked at each other's edits and tried to whittle it down to 4 or 5, maybe 6, and went through all 75 years again. And then we had these various collections, and then we finally had to get serious, because we said, how many pictures can we have in this exhibit? How many pictures can we have in this exhibit, Brian?
How many can we have? Yeah. Well, I think we decided 121.
I think we decided we were going to have like 100, but we cheated. And so we looked at the pictures, and then we were kind of trying to represent the communities across the state, representing these topics. Pictures that work together, that weren't repetitive, that would represent the life experience. And so it's kind of a complicated equation, an imprecise, I guess, but complicated equation. And we were also determined to try to have the best pictures possible from the workshop, but also ones that were really representative of the state. And we were determined to have good caption information. And so we were looking, I mean, if you spend any time at all in the exhibit, I think a couple of people have mentioned to me already how much they appreciate reading the captions, because they are not, it's not a name line, it's not the captions do not repeat what's going on in the photograph, but rather try to add information.
Yeah. And there's some, I mean, we were able to uncover some pretty wonderful stories, kind of at the last minute. There's a photograph that was made in Sedalia in 1980, and it shows a young 9-year-old black student surrounded by her all-white classmates. And David and I turned this picture up when we were doing an exhibit for Black History Month at Ellis Library, and we were able to get in touch with the photographer, Donna Covini, at that time, and she talked a little bit about the process of making that picture, but she didn't remember the child's name. And that was 2010, and for 13 years I had wondered, gosh, I wonder who that girl is. I'd love to know her name. So this year we're getting ready to go back to Sedalia for the 75th, and Kevin Lujan, he's sitting right here, he started a Facebook group and started showing pictures. And all of a sudden he gets a hit, who's this woman saying, gosh, that's me. That's me in that photo. And it turns out she lives right here in Columbia. And when David and I were helping, and Brian were helping to hang that exhibit, she came in and we got to talk with her and visit with her. It was really wonderful. There's a picture, I think I showed it in my presentation, a small 90-some-year-old man with a big post oak tree. And I was able to get a hold of the photographer of that image, Kelly Huff. And that was made in 1999 in West Plains. But I invite you to go back into the exhibit and read the story behind that photograph. All of those photos have incredible stories behind them, and it's just a shame that we don't know more of the stories for more of the photos.
And it was through the Facebook group and just the fact of having more of these images out and shared that we've been able to piece a few more stories together, and that's kind of exciting. But you there's not really, some of these photographs don't repeat themselves. But there's 2 photographs of barbershops, right?
I think there's 3.
Oh, well, uh-oh, did we mess up?
Well, they say different things. I think it was, I don't know, Rita used to say you have to drown your puppies, but there's only so many puppies you can drown. We thought they represented different aspects, right. Different approaches.
Different approaches, different aspects, but they are separated. They may be similar scenes, but they're separated by decades.
True. Life goes on. Yeah. And as Jim points out if you buy that set of cards, Jim has a really interesting explanation about the role of barbershops in small town Missouri. So, yeah.
And you know what? Wasn't there at least one story done on barbershops again this year in Sedalia?
Is that a continuing theme?
What it is. This one was really different, and if we do another set of barbershop pictures, I'm definitely going to have to switch one out, because this was a black barber who was also a mixed martial arts fighter.
Good character.
So once we have all the all the arm wrestling, we got down to what we thought was going to be our edit. The printing was done by an MU student on an Epson printer in a photojournalism lab, the McDougall Center Photojournalism Lab. Kate Cassidy. Kate, are you here? I'm not sure she's here. She was trained by another student, grad student, Tristan Rouse. But it's an amazing printer, but really an amazing effort by Kate to do all that printing. And then she would trim them to specific sizes from the roll paper. And then Chris Knorr from St. Genevieve did all the framing. We decided to match some frames that we had from before. And so that's the frame style, but he did an amazing job and in a fairly timely way to get everything here. And the final layout for the exhibit was more of an organic process, I guess. Because we knew the pictures we wanted. We weren't exactly sure where they would all go until everything was framed. And then we put them up against the wall and put it here and put it there and put it here. We had general notions about what we wanted to anchor each wall. And then the exhibit sort of built itself by talking to the pictures. When you talk to pictures, they usually talk back to you. And usually they say nice things. But it's want to acknowledge the patience and the confidence shown by Joan Stack, who's the curator, the art curator here at Shishmo, and Greg Thompson, who is the collections manager, art collections manager, and Cynthia Evans, who is an assistant preparator for their work work with us and letting us do a lot of the work.
It was a lot of hands-on going on,
Yeah.
moving pictures to different locations, and then we don't want to forget Michelle Gutierrez and Nicole Gutierrez. All of the caption sheets, the map, the little red dot moves around depending on where the photograph was taken. The typography, the design of that's attributed to Michelle and Nicole Gutierrez, who were doing this from Minnesota and shipping these to us for copy edits. And that was a fun process. I never knew how many commas I could misplace.
And after the captions were all perfect, Renee Kratzer, Brian's wife, who's a terrific designer and editor, looked at them one more time or two more times and made all the final corrections. So you owe her. We all owe Renee.
I do owe her. I was gone for 10 days, and she's still cashing in on that.
So you might wonder if we second guess ourselves about the exhibit. Yes.
We left a lot of stuff out.
But are we happy with it? Yes. And we hope that you'll feel something about it too, some things as you look at it, that you get a sense of the state, the joys, the struggles, what life is like out there, in here.
No questions?
Martha.
So for our online friends, the question from Martha Pickens is, has anybody from a town ever said, no thanks? We want to come to your town, but no thanks. Has that happened?
Sometimes they say, get gone once we've been there.
Yeah, sometimes they're happy to see the last of us.
See our taillights. No, I generally it's been a very positive experience. We've had some towns who have approached us, and they would like the workshop to come or to come back there, and we will often, how do we find the towns? Well, sometimes it's a road trip where Jim and I, or the three of us, or Jim and Brian will do a road trip and check out one or two places, three places. A couple years ago, Jim and I made a trip all the way to Arkansas and back, and stopped in like 3 or 4 different towns. And sometimes we have a lead, and we go down and we check it out, and it just doesn't feel right. And then, when we were going down, where were we, Curly? Remember?
When we were checking out Waynesville and St. Robert, down by Fort Leonard Wood, right there on what highway was that? It's off of some interstate, and 44, yeah.
It seemed intellectually like it'd be a great place to be, but
it just was bleak. I mean, all the motels were on one side of the highway, and the other side of the highway was nothing but strip malls and fast food joints. But I don't know whose idea it was. On the way back, we were just kind of, well, that's not going to work. And then one of us said, well, let's go through Eldon on the way back. And
as Bill said, we stopped at the newspaper office. It was often a good place to start. And it's like, welcome home, We've been waiting for you.
Well, yeah, it just so happened that the newspaper publisher and his son were both there that afternoon, which doesn't usually happen. So we say, well, we're with Missouri Photo Workshop, and we were trying to explain a little bit about what the workshop is, and the editor says, well, I know all about the workshop. And we say, oh, that's interesting. And we say, well, he says, well, what do you need? Well, we need a place, we need a headquarters. And son looks at the dad and says, hey, what about that old gymnasium? Call Matt. So they get on the phone, they call the superintendent of schools, an MU alum, and go on, David, finish it up.
I don't know. It just happened. You know, it's like one thing after another. It all falls into place. Sometimes you think you've got it all figured out, and it doesn't work out quite the way you hoped it would. But
there was one snag. There was supposed to be a homecoming dance in that building, the night during the week that we were there, and Matt Davis says, "Don't worry about that. We'll switch it."
It was funny because the night of the dance, I think, was it must have been a Friday night, but the message didn't get to everybody because there were about 3 couples that showed up in formal wear at our front door. And we're like, kind of like, well, where did they reschedule that dance? Didn't know where to send them off to.
I just remember getting back in the car with David after we met with those people, and David just says, "Well, that's how we roll."
Yeah. A little serendipity, Bill.
Stone Phillips. Stone Phillips.
Oh, that's the name of the guy?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, okay. Well, they had, I was too busy running the work. I wasn't paying attention. But they were in. We given them permission to not carry on the workshop, which they did. ABC TV was given permission to document the Washington workshop that year. And they came in and we explained what would happen and basically said, you know, hang out. We're all journalists here. We're not going to try to put limitations on you. So what they did then was to go out and videotape the parade, which we weren't working with. And then there were other cliche topics that they big city folks associated with rural Missouri. And so we never saw them until the workshop was over because they were so busy doing their workshop coverage, okay? So that, but then they found out about that picture afterwards, and somehow, I don't know how it happened, they got their hands on it, and when they produced the video, which aired on ABC television, here was the photograph of the family being arrested by the cops. I was at the induction ceremony for Missouri Photojournalism fame, what do we call that, the Hall of Fame? Yeah. And I was talking to Bill Miller, who was the editor of the Washington paper, and they've been supportive of the workshop for years and years. And he said, you know, it didn't really present the best face of this town. But then he said, well, you know, that's the way it works. So sometimes the outcome is not 100% appreciated by all the people in the community. One other point, just if I may, there's a gaping hole in the Missouri photojournalism program, and that's what exactly was Cliff doing in Aurora, Missouri? And I think one of the themes that's gone through several presentations here today is that so much of the content is driven by the technology. And what Mr. March and Cliff were doing down in Aurora was they were creating opportunities for journalists on weekly newspapers to greatly expand their offerings through the photographs. I'd like to know what newspapers went to those workshops. I'd like to know if those little engraving plants started something in these communities around. So I've tried to research that by telephone. I've spoken recently with the head of the Historical Society in Aurora, who tells me that there is a person in Aurora who has a garage full of documents from Aurora's history. This may be a real good database to mine for what the Tassape Corporation was doing. there is still, I think, a TASAPE down there, but they do something totally different now. And so I'm just challenging the graduate students of the Missouri School of Journalism to get your butts out of the seats and put them in the car and go on down to Aurora and talk to these people. See if you can get into that garage and mine that for the assets that it has. I mean, there are a lot of things that people do on the way to a graduate program or to a degree, an advanced degree, that they say, well, I got to do something. And they do something, and they get the degree. But here's something that really could be a lot of fun and of tremendous importance to not just showing the roots of the Missouri photo program, but also getting a snapshot of what life was like on small newspapers and which ones rose to the top and so on. Anyway, this is not the first time I've made this speech, I want you to know. So, but I still think it's a good topic, and I would be delighted to be on their committee. Any other questions or any thoughts?
John Fennell.
In the editing process, when you guys had a kind of a disagreement in some ways about what was going in and what was getting out, and did that ever happen as you were choosing photos for? Exactly right.
I think we all had our favorites. I mean, I remember lobbying hard for if you're in there, the picture from Perryville of the three people kind of going crazily down the gravel road, high on something, high on life. I just loved that picture. And I remember Jim wasn't so fond of it. But you know, he let me win that one. And then there are others that I wasn't perhaps so fond of, but he got to win. So it's often a kind of a compromise. You don't get to win all the time.
So you were able to compromise. Does anybody have this has got to be in, this has got to be in, and somebody disagreed?
I don't think we ever went that far.
No. Well, that's good. That's great.
We were never drinking beer when we did this.
No, never, no. But I think if one person had a very visceral reaction to an image, like, oh my, this is so important, it probably resonates with the rest of us too. I mean, the jumping mule seems like a shoe-in. Mr. Bradley's farm, Twilight on Bradley's farm.
You had to take the jumping mule out of your office.
I let it out, yeah. It was in my office, but it'll come back, I guess. I replaced it with a McDougal photograph of Truman on the back of a train. Wonderful, guys.
Should we ask Dwayne for his marching orders?
I think it's that time in the night, if this is what we're doing at MPW right now, that we would have given everybody we would have introduced everybody to their crew. I'm sorry, we would have introduced everybody to their faculty at this point. And what was tradition, you know, David in his presentation mentioned Technical Director Hanny Hawasley, and it is this huge to say that, don't need two microphones, that's overkill, to say that Hanny's influence on the workshop has been huge. He is the technical backbone. He's in New York City. He teaches video and documentary work. He's with the Video Consortium. So this last video that I'm going to show, and we're going to end on it, because that's how we roll, is we make a big statement and then walk out. It marks our tradition on the first night of the workshop. So this is a voice from the past, folks. For many years, Dwayne Daly delivered our marching orders. This is a directive from Dwayne to the workshop photographers, telling them what he expected of them that week. We're fortunate that Technical Director Hanny Hawasley archived this full video of Dwayne's orders. We'll end on this video. I very much appreciate you all being here to share these stories, to ask us interesting questions, to explore this exhibit. And you're welcome to come next door to Lee Hills Hall, where Dr. Keith Greenwood. He's the director of the McDougall Center on the bottom floor of Lee Hills Hall, and he has installed a wonderful exhibit that is highlighting this year's inductees into the Missouri Photojournalism Hall of Fame. Those photographs were printed by Austin Johnson. He's a graduate student. And so Keith and Austin worked very hard on those. And so after this video, I want y'all to know that tonight at 4 o'clock, we're all gonna be back in this room celebrating the 4 photojournalists and journalists that are gonna be inducted into this year's Hall of Fame class. So we're going to listen to Dwayne's marching orders.
This week will change your life. It changed my life. The first time, my first week in Missouri Photo Workshop was Cape Girardeau a long time ago. 1 week changed my life because I thought I was a photographer. Then I found out, oh, what I want to be is a photojournalist. I want to tell stories. It's misleading to think of it as a Missouri Photo Workshop because it's so much more. It's the thinking workshop. It's a workshop about people. It's a workshop about telling stories with pictures, telling stories. And we can do that in lots of different ways. And you've got good skills in photography. You are photographers or you wouldn't be here. You've been selected because you're a good photographer. What we want you to do is step forward a step or two and get deeper into the story. What are you what can you say with your pictures? Listen to your faculty. They're not here to argue with you. Be open to new ideas. Go out not as a photographer, go out as a person. You've got to earn the right to be next to that person close enough by being a person, not as a photographer. So go with your camera, but not a whole bag full of cameras and 2 cameras and long lenses and look like a traveling camera store. No, play down the camera part, but that's not what you want to leave the impression. You want to leave the impression that you're a very interesting person to have around to talk to, and then you have an interesting chance to talk to them. So earn your way into a situation. The main thing to remember, the main thing is don't let the situation get you down. I got pretty down in my situation the first week the first photo workshop I attended. Hearing the faculty talk about my pictures, I wasn't sure that I should be a photographer, and I wasn't even sure I was supposed to be a live human being, So don't let that happen to you. One of the things that Bill Kirkendall and I brought to the workshop was tried to make it a kinder and gentler workshop. Now, you won't believe me tomorrow and the next day and the next day, but it is. It is much easier. It's not a drill camp for the Marine Corps. Their faculty will listen to you. Use that wisely, but spend most of your time out gathering the information. You're a storyteller. You're a photojournalist.